Bibi broke weak and whittled it down to the point where we are now. I mean, it's hard for me to admit this. We are now feeding our enemy. I mean, this has never happened in history before, and you have to ask why. And I don't want to hear this business that it's consistent with Jewish morality. It isn't. Anybody saying that doesn't know anything about Jewish morality at all.
We are with Jonathan Pollard, who is a candidate for Knesset, who was gracious enough to grant me an interview a couple weeks back. And we're going to talk about his aspirations to, God willing, be successful and join the Knesset and think outside the box. We are talking outside the box, as we always do, because we're not about fetching and we're not about complaining. We're about changing things. And with us today is Jonathan Pollard, who has really devoted his life to changing things. And I'm really excited to have him on the show to talk a little bit about the article that we did earlier about his run for the Knesset and what he stands for. So welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, Judith. It's a pleasure to be here.
So your announcement to run for Knesset was not a surprise to a lot of people. But one of the big arguments I heard after I published was, well, how is he going to communicate with the Knesset people if he doesn't speak fluent Hebrew and he hasn't mastered the art of Hebrew yet? Do you have an answer?
Yeah, I've been asked that question a lot of times in Hebrew, which, I'm used to now. And I usually respond, on the one hand, by saying, well, with an AI program, especially when I'm giving speeches, voice to text, it's like a miracle. I mean, people have had no problem understanding me. The program I'm using is nearly 100% accurate. But what I told one lady who asked me that question, I said to her, would you agree that with the possible exception of Golda Meir and maybe Levi Eshkol, most of our leaders since 1948 have been fluent Hebrew speakers? And she said, yes, that's true. And I said, yeah, well, how'd that turn out? I don't think it's the language you use, but it's the dedication and honesty with which you bring to the debate.
But how are you going to debate when they're spewing Hebrew? You know, I mean, there's cultural differences as well as language.
There are major differences culturally. I'll do my best. There's just, I can go just so far based on my record. Beyond that, people want to know what your policies are. And I'll try to get as many of them published in Ivrit, in Hebrew, as I can. And I'll give as many speeches with an AI translator as I can. But I think as far as the major issues are concerned, most people understand where I'm going, where I want to go. And I tell people, you may disagree with what I'm saying, assuming you understand me. You may disagree with what I'm saying, but I will never lie to you. I was lied to for 35 years. I know how it feels. So I think honesty and candor are probably the best attributes I have going forward.
When you talk about being lied to, can you...
Lied to by the government.
Which government?
The Israeli government. No, the American government, I expected, the lies and the misstatements and the mischaracterizations of my character and my mission. But as far as the Israeli government was concerned, I never got a straight answer from any administration. The closest I came to it was a member of the intelligence community that came to see me in prison with an American monitor present. And he, suggested that I kill myself if I were a real patriot.
Patriot American or Patriot Israeli?
Israeli.
Wow.
And Esther, alayha shalom, my wife at the time, was so horrified by that. She ran the issue down. Yuli Edelstein was very helpful at the time and called my boss in to see him, Rafi Eitan, and asked him point blank, did you send somebody to see Jonathan and suggest that he kill himself because he's causing trouble for the country he ostensibly owes his loyalty to? And he answered twice, no comment. So that was enough for Yuli to figure out exactly, what was going on. Strangely enough, the American monitor, who was a lieutenant colonel in the National Security Agency, threw the Israeli out, chucked him right out, and came down back to me and said, "Don't
do it.
Don't do it," because he said, you're going to go home one day. He said, just don't satisfy the politicians.
Just one more question about your incarceration. Who do you attribute it to? Was it the Israelis that were keeping you in, or was it the Americans?
As they say, chetzi chetzi. It's 50-50. The Americans kept me on ice for two reasons initially. I was in solitary confinement for 7 years, about 150 meters down in a 3 square meter cell. I never left for 7 years, that room. They kept me there. One of the reasons they kept me there was they actually thought I was a Soviet agent. That was because of Aldrich Ames, the Soviet mole in the CIA, who was ordered by the Fifth Directorate to blame all of the deaths that he was causing amongst American and British agents in the Soviet Union on me. Complicated story, but eventually the truth came out that I had nothing to do with it, his activities. The second reason was that I was involved, actually to a very large extent, with Iran-Contra. And the Americans found out about it and didn't want me talking because it was an illegal operation on their side.
So that was the American part. But
there was another reason, and they wanted me to, after my interrogation, which left me 100% disabled, they kept me in isolation for 7 years, and then they put me in a facility that we called a gladiator school. It was very violent. They wanted me to cooperate. Mostly, it wasn't just identifying my team, which I never did, but they wanted me to sign off on a document implicating the majority of the American Jewish leadership with my activities. This was a move to politically decapitate.
Who was the president at the time?
Well, Reagan and then Clinton. But again, I don't attribute this to President Reagan. Washington was full of factions at the time, and I just had the misfortune of falling into the clutches of the pro-Arab faction. And so that was those were the major reasons for the Americans. They also, and they were pretty clear about this, wanted to use me as a cautionary tale for the American Jewish community, that if you cross the line, so to speak, this is how you're going to be handled. There'll be no mercy on you at all. So that was the Americans. As far as the Israelis are concerned, I was warned repeatedly when I finally could see people that the Mossad in particular wanted me dead. The Mossad, this was an attempt on the Mossad to blacken the reputation of a competing intelligence agency, which was called LACOM. It's an acronym.
We should probably unpack that a little bit. There are 3 intelligence agencies in Israel, right? One is the Army Intelligence.
Haman.
Right.
And then there's the Mossad. There's some, there's 8,200, which is mostly works for the military. That's like their national security agency. But there's another organization, was and I think still is, called LACAM, which works within the Curia, the Ministry of Defense, on very, the euphemism is scientific and technical intelligence, but they run the gamut of what they do. And Rafi, Rafi Eitan, who thought that he was going to be the head of the Mossad, got a consolation prize of being the head of LACAM. And he used the information that I was providing as a cudgel to beat and embarrass the Mossad in cabinet meetings, no less.
So it was spy versus spy.
It was spy versus spy, yeah. And so when I was caught, the Mossad figured prominently in defaming me, in mischaracterizing my motives, and endorsing my interrogation, which, as I described to several people, was pretty brutal. I later found out when I came home to Israel that they knew exactly what was being done to me and more or less signed off on it.
I want to shift now, because now we're going to look at the future and hopefully politics. How are you going to get along if you've got these rifts with the Americans, or have had these rifts with the Americans and ostensibly here in Israel? How are you going to be able to succeed politically?
My rifts with the Americans really aren't relevant anymore. They got their pound of flesh out of me. I've been a good boy. I've followed all the restrictions that I've been told to follow in terms of staying away from certain issues and material that could compromise national security. The other thing with the Americans you have to understand is that most of them now understand my indictment. My indictment said, put plainly, that I was accused of compromising national security information to a major non-NATO ally, parenthesis Israel, without intent to harm the United States. And when people back in the United States finally take the time to read my indictment, they understand that there was a lot more going on. Plus, they understand, and well, I was asked a few weeks ago, what am I politically? And I said, well, to the person asking me, I said, you consider yourself an America firster, right? And he said, of course. I said, well, I consider myself an Israel firster. So he said, you hate the United States after what happened to you? I said, no. Unfortunately, it's just goes with the territory. And I said, if the United States suggests a policy for us to follow or endorse, and it's good for us, fine, I have no problem with that. And he said, and if it isn't good for you, I said, I'll fight it to every ounce of my strength. He said, okay, I understand that, and that's fine.
Okay, let's shift into, you have at least 10 principles that you attribute to your mission in politics. Let's cover a few of them.
Okay.
Do you want to start with the 900 soldiers that we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I should understand, or you should understand, why I actually decided to go into politics, which was something that I really didn't intend to, for a number of reasons. It's known quite accurately as the swamp here in Israel. And so it took something radical to get me into it. What was that? October 7th. What happened up until that time, I was under the misperception that my abandonment and betrayal had been an outlier, had been the exception to the rule. But when I saw the GoPro videos of the Nukba terrorists on October 7th, I got into the Telegram channel that was carrying it. I suddenly realized something, is that I was not an outlier. I was not the exception to the rule. The government had abandoned and betrayed our entire country. And that's left, right, and center. And I just said at that point, I turned to my wife, Rivka, and I said, I can't let this happen again. What happened to me was one thing. This is happening to the whole country. So at that point, I suddenly came to the realization that I couldn't fetch anymore. I couldn't complain anymore without actually doing something tachlis, without doing something meaningful to change this situation. I'm not under any illusion. I'm one person. I don't consider myself a man on the white horse. I'm a simple guy, actually, who's angry and fed up and at the end of my patience. As far as the 900 soldiers are concerned, this terrible mark that we've just reached, the 900th death of one of our soldiers, I have to make it very clear to people that my primary concern is for the welfare and security of our soldiers, our sacred soldiers. These are our sons, our daughters, sometimes our grandfathers and grandmothers. We are a people's army. We're not mercenaries. We're not a professional army. We have a professional army, but our army basically is a people's army from the reservists. And what I've come to realize is that the military philosophy of the military puts more emphasis on taking care of the enemy, whether combatants or civilians, than they do our own civilians and our own military. So I'll give you an example that kind of, I think, epitomizes what I'm up against. A man that I deeply respect, Ambassador Yechiel Leiter, he's the Israeli ambassador to the United States right now, lost his son, a wonderful man, a wonderful, wonderful man in Gaza. And when Yechiel was recently on CNN with Jake Tapper, who's also, I have a lot of respect for him as a journalist, he was asked about this issue of us, committing genocide in Gaza. And Yechiel answered correctly, saying, look, after what we showed we could do in Iran during the 12-day war, I don't think anybody is under the illusion that misperception that if we wanted to wipe Gaza out in one day, we had the means to do so. But that's not what we're doing. And, he said he lost his son because of our values, because of our morality. And if I can be very blunt with you, that was BS. Because his son was worth more than every single Gazan right now. He was a Jewish warrior. And we owe our complete and unqualified loyalty to the safety and security of our chayalim, our soldiers. They are putting their lives on the line so that the Third Jewish Commonwealth, with God's help, can exist. So I was shocked and disappointed in my friends, in Yechiel's inability to understand that this morality that we're using to justify our behavior right now is a lie.
So it's proportional response.
I don't believe in proportionality at all, and that's one of my principles. This is an alien concept to war. Look, if you read The Purity of Arms, which is the booklet that's used to indoctrinate soldiers, it's not...
or indoctrinate?
I would say indoctrinate. It is not a Jewish... there are no Jewish concepts in there. This whole notion of tikkun olam has been misapplied, misinterpreted, misused by the left. It isn't what they say it is. And if you look at The Purity of Arms, it was written by an academic who didn't understand anything about war. And it's a bunch of leftist hogwash.
And this is a booklet that's given to
every soldier. Okay? I take our morality in war from Torah. It's all there. What we should and shouldn't do. One of the concepts in this Purity of Arms book, which is really horrifying, is their rejection, the author's rejection of decisive victory. He feels that we are only allowed to stop the enemy, but not to go beyond that. Now, this is insane.
Well, that's the mowing the lawn.
This is mowing the lawn, kicking the can down the road, managing the enemy. Okay, so when we reach this number of 900, what this tells me is that the army doesn't really understand anything about war, and it doesn't. We, on October 8th, should have simply told Hamas, we're going to give you 24 hours to release our hostages and the bodies of those who are dead. And if you don't abide by that timeline, there won't be anything left from Jabalia in the north to Rafah in the south. The tallest building in Gaza will be an anthill. I argued, and I have argued and I will continue to argue, that the mode of warfare that we're using right now is guaranteed to kill our soldiers. This is this kind of urban combat scenario. I don't believe in urban combat at all. I don't believe in Stalingrad on the Med, as I call it. I believe right now, for example, that our soldiers shouldn't be involved in house-to-house warfare. We should pull them back. I am not my enemy. I will tell the Gazans, you have 24 hours to get somewhere. If you want to eat, you got to go someplace. If you want to live, you definitely have to go someplace. And then I would proceed, and I've outlined the tactics that I would use. And the tactics are designed to protect our soldiers. We have a sacred obligation to protect these men and women who are fighting Al-Kiddush Hashem on our behalf. Who are protecting us.
Yes.
I mean, you can be very utilitarian about this and just say, to the extent that we protect their lives and welfare, we're protecting our own. But I go beyond that. I think that's a very cynical view. It might be accurate, but it's too cynical. After October 7th, what is clear is that our successes, such as they are in Gaza, has been paid at the cost of our blood, our soldiers' blood. And I don't accept that at all. At all.
Is there anyone in the government currently that you could see yourself aligning with, or that whose position you respect, or are you completely rogue? I mean, how would you describe yourself?
I have a rough time accepting anybody who has been associated with the government right now because of what happened on October 7th. Whether they were guilty of the sin of commission or omission is irrelevant to me. But, I'm not in charge of the election. So if people really want to be stupid about these things, they can vote for a guy like, I don't know, Yossi Cohen, the former head of the Mossad. And certainly if being somebody right out of GQ was a prerequisite for the premiership, he would win. There's no question. But people have to understand that what he represents is old wine in a new bottle. He was part of the misconceptia. He was the link that Bibi had with Qatar. He brings nothing to the table at all, as far as I'm concerned.
Is there anyone that you do have some sort of affinity for?
Believe it or not, I like Israel Katz. I know him personally. I would consider him a friend. I was proud that just a day after on October 8th, he immediately said no water, no electricity, no food, no nothing until our hostages came out. And that was the correct policy to have at the time. But then Bibi broke weak and whittled it down to the point where we are now. I mean, it's hard for me to admit this. We are now feeding our enemy. I mean, this has never happened in history before. And you have to ask why. And I don't want to hear this business that it's consistent with Jewish morality. It isn't. Anybody saying that doesn't know anything about Jewish morality at all.
Well, I think also our leaders have had their necks in a vice grip by other countries who.
Okay, let me give you an example of that. I was criticized very heavily for opposing the ceasefire, the American imposed ceasefire in Lebanon on us. And I was told by certain people in the government, look, we didn't have choice because we were being threatened with a complete cutoff of arms. So I listened to this, and the individual telling me this said, you don't believe this? Or what? I said, no, I believe that the Biden administration, as I called it, did threaten us. But I said, you're mistaken if you think there's never a choice. There was a choice. He said, well, what? Is it to have our weapons cut off? I said, no, let me bring you back to October 1973 during the Yom Kippur War when Henry Kissinger instituted an arms embargo against us. He stopped the aerial resupply of our army at that point to extract diplomatic concessions from us. And what happened? What happened was an A-4 Skyhawk was parked at Tel Nof Air Base with some interesting weapons under its wings. And we told the Americans, take your eye in the sky and take a good look at the airplane that's on that runway. And the next day, the airlift started. So the guy that I was talking...
Which airlift?
To Israel.
Uh-huh.
The arms airlift.
So in other words, we threatened their...
We threatened to use unconventional weapons. I'll leave it at that. And so he said, is this what you want us to threaten now? I said, absolutely, except this time I want us to go forward with it if necessary. If they think we're bluffing, we go forward with it. Look,
wait, some people might look at this and hear you saying these things and say, he's a dangerous dude. You know, he could, blow up the entire Middle East.
Well, I guess people really haven't been keeping their eyes open since October 7th because the whole Middle East has blown up. And as far as I'm concerned, when we are faced with an existential threat, we have the right to use any and all weapons in our disposal to eliminate that existential threat. Look, a lot of people don't know anything about, academically speaking, nuclear weapons at all. What they are, how they can be used responsibly. And I'm tired of using euphemisms. I'm tired of saying, well, we have something, in the basement, but we won't be the first to introduce nuclear weapons in the Middle East. It's enough already.
Now let's talk about another decision or situation that's emerging this week. The one to declare a Palestinian state, which the UN is supposed to vote on with some of our arch enemies pitching in and weighing in on that. What would you do if you had some influence, if you were in Knesset or in charge?
What would I advise? What would I recommend? What we have to do is, first of all, declare that Oslo is dead. That's number one. The fact that the PLO never signed the document is something, it's the worst kept secret I've ever seen. The document actually has no force because the other side never signed it. So leaving that detail aside, number one, Oslo is dead. Number two, we have to take action on the ground that will rule out the creation of this another terror state in our God-given biblical heartland. What are those actions? The actions are to declare sovereignty immediately over the Beka, the Jordan River Valley, Yehuda, Shomron, Judea and Samaria, and Gaza and Gaza. Okay? And that's one step that's very important. The second step is to immediately begin the destruction of all of the illegal Arab structures in Area C.
There's a lot of structures.
There's a lot of structures. I mean, Regavim, which is a great organization, has been documenting this process for years to no avail. So we have to start on that immediately. We have to focus equally against the Palestinian Authority, the pay-for-slay guys. We know how to target people. We know how to decapitate the political and military leadership of our enemies. I would suggest that we give another demonstration of that in Ramallah.
And what does sovereignty look like exactly? I mean, the big argument is you're going to let these people vote?
No.
You're going to make them Israeli? What are we doing?
No. These people have shown no interest ever in living in peace with us at all. And certainly after the PA took over, as a result of Oslo, the misapplied agreement with them, they've been indoctrinated in hatred. Okay. What we do once we get rid of the PA kinetically, we basically tell them they need to get somewhere. Now, there are many that will live with us in peace. The 5 sheikhs, for example, in Hebron, I don't want to kick them out. If they,
you want to make them Israeli?
I don't want to make them Israeli at all. They will be...
will they be paying taxes?
They will be paying taxes.
Will they vote?
They will not vote. They will be paying taxes basically for their education and their social support network, their medical support, their security, which we're going to provide. They have to understand that only Jews will be allowed to own property in our biblical heartland. They can rent, they can...
And what happens to the ones that already own property in their town?
I don't recognize them because they are the occupiers. I will be more than happy to live next to an Arab who understands these things. Their lives will be protected. Their freedom of religion will be protected. Their freedom of speech to a limit will be protected. But the vast majority of them will have to go. Now, who am I talking?
Where are they going? Jordan doesn't want them. Egypt doesn't want them.
Yeah, there are going to be some very hard choices that these countries are going to have to make. Syria is one dumping ground, and I use that term advisedly, is one dumping ground that may very well want to take them. A lot of people don't realize that the Syrians are actually engaged in repopulating northern Syria right now with Palestinians.
But you can't airlift them into Syria, you have...
No, you basically, right now, Syria, for example, I mean, if you're talking tachlis, if you're talking practicality, Syria is in absolutely no condition to stop us from doing anything at all. So when you say, how would we respond to this attempt at imposing, once again, a division of the land? Well, if the law doesn't protect us, that is the League of Nations mandate in San Remo, the San Remo agreement, if the law doesn't protect us, then we have to look after ourselves in any way that we deem to be appropriate. These people have made it in Yehuda and Shomron in particular have made it very clear that 70-80% of them not only endorse what happened on October 7th, but would like to see it repeated initially in Yehuda and Shomron against our people, and then against Israel proper.
Yeah.
So, you can mislead yourself into thinking that if we show unwarranted compassion and understanding for these people, that it will be recognized as something more than weakness. But you would be mistaken in assuming that. When you are kind to people like this, the only thing they think is you're weak. And so our military policy in Yehuda and Shomron is guaranteeing failure, because our enemies simply do not understand the consequences of their hatred.
But we did talk about diplomacy at some point, and you know
what a diplomat is? Lord Acton defined a diplomat as an honest man sent abroad to lie for his country. Now, how does that apply here? And why am I not diplomatic? I helped dig the graves of too many people on Har Herzl after October 7th. And why I was asked, I keep my mouth shut. And there I saw all of Israel engaged in burying the victims of people who preferred diplomacy over action. I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I will not be a hypocrite. I am not a Bibista. This man, Bibi, if I were diplomatic, they say, why don't you show Hakarat Zatov to him? He brought you home, right? And my attitude is, he didn't bring me home. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought me home, and his shaliach was my dear wife, Esther, alayha shalom. Those were the ones that brought me home, not Bibi. What did Bibi do? Bibi set the stage for October 7th, something that he has never, ever acknowledged. Mr. Teflon, I don't know what you want to call him, but he has the blood of October 7th literally over his entire body. And what he should have, the only way out for him should have been the complete and immediate destruction of Hamas. No ifs, ands, or buts. No feeding humanitarian aid, no diplomacy, no weak-kneed rationalization of why we have to do this or that. Just give us our hostages and the bodies of our dead, or you die. But he didn't do that, and I won't be diplomatic about that. The time for diplomacy is over. I've looked into the eyes of too many widows to accept a continuation of diplomacy. I've looked into the eyes of too many orphan children. I've been in too many rehabilitation wards in hospitals where in one case a chayal, a soldier, wheeled up to me in his wheelchair and pulled his blanket off his knees. He had no legs. And he asked me a question that still haunts me to this day. What did I lose my legs for? This is after it was announced that Bibi would like the PA to go and take control of Gaza. And let's not confuse the issue. That's what he wants. Bibi has been trying to get rid of Gaza from October 7th. It's like, he feels like he's the dog that catches the car. What do I do with it then?
Well, Jonathan Pollard, I think it's going to be a very interesting run. I wish you luck.
I'll need it.
Yeah. And health and it should be a good year for everybody.